Hello.
Hi, Rajni. Hi, Ashish.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. So we'll just start in a minute. We have got participants pouring in like anything. Ashish, we've got more than 250 odd participants just coming in. So we'll just wait for 1 minute more, Rajni, Sanjay ji, and then we'll just start in the next 1 minute, if that's okay. Rajni and Sanjay ji, with your permission, we will start.
Yes, Karthik, please do.
Thanks. So welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Namaste. Today we have got an amazing packed session with two amazing speakers who are going to talk about digital leadership and innovation in current times. In the first half of the session, we are extremely honored and privileged to have Ashish Kashyap with us, whom I'm sure all of you know. We have read about him. We have heard him speak in TV interviews and news channels. And it's so amazing to have you with us, Ashish. I'll just give a quick introduction about Ashish because if you want to see his entire profile, it's going to take half an hour itself. But we all know him from the Go Ibibo fame. But even before Go Ibibo, I'm sure many of you would know that he was working at India Times, where he was influential in starting the India internet growth story. He was also one of the first, country heads for Google in India. And then he went on and set up the IBBO group and brought in Nespers in India. And he didn't stop at that. He did one of the biggest exits and the M&A activity in India a couple of years back when Make My Trip acquired the Go IBBO, and he made the exit. And last 1.5 years or so, Ashish is focused on building of a AI-based wealth management platform called IND Wealth, with a vision to democratize finance for the average India. Now, Ashish, you got so many achievements, so many awards, not even mentioning all of them here. But, what I want to know is, after this massive exit from the MMT Go IBBO deal, I mean, any average entrepreneur would have thought about, taking the check home and maybe buying an island in Bahamas and retiring, like most of us average mortals would think. But you didn't stop there. You built another company from the scratch called IND Wealth. And I was reading, you're already raising Series C in that company as well. So there's no stopping you, is it? I mean, what drives you? How do you get so much of energy and passion? Just share us with us.
Yeah, look, I think firstly, thanks for inviting me. Much appreciated. And thanks to everyone for catching up today. So firstly, much appreciated. Late afternoon, first post-lunch slot, as I would say. I wonder how people are keeping themselves up. But nevertheless, I'll try and keep it interesting, interactive. Would love to address questions and thoughts. It's a pretty interesting time and an unprecedented time, as all of you know. But going back to your question, I don't think people who build or create can stop. So it's the same question, you would typically ask any person who produces a work of art. Let's say a person who dances, a person who acts, a person who sings, what keeps them going? It's
Right.
really the passion to create impact, to entertain people, to create, and in case of context of entrepreneurs such as me, it is really the passion to create impact, make a difference in the lives of the people, right? It obviously goes beyond financial motivations. Of course, one has to create value for people who back you, invest in your ideas and ventures. But I think the overarching more overarching motivation is really to create impact and to make a difference in the lives of the people. And that's what keeps people like me going and keep building and creating. And this is beyond a job for people like me. This is like our passion and hobby, right? So
Right.
yeah, that's really how is my perspective.
You're very kind and humble, Ashish. Ashish, when you started your journey back in the India Times days, I mean, the Indian internet growth story was just starting, beginning, its sort of roots. And, from that, when you moved on to Go IBBO and now you have your latest venture, IND Wealth, I mean, the India is now the largest internet market in the world. I mean, earlier people didn't have much choices. Now they're spoiled for choices. So you've seen that era in which you had to really hard sell some of the digital products to an average Indian, to an era where they have so many choices, so many platforms, and you have seen it all, this entire journey and the entire transition happening. How do you see the new age entrepreneurs who are starting their business in this sort of digital arena? What would you advise them to think differently? Because you've seen the pre era as well, and you have seen what the West has done. So, what kind of concise learnings you would like to share with us?
Yeah, look, I mean, very good question. And clearly, while everything looks rosy, there are some realities which I'm going to share with the audience out here, and at the same time, opportunities. So let me first start. When I started my journey in the consumer tech space, largely, which was largely driven by the early days at IBBO, when I started building the online travel business and payments business.
Mm-hmm.
There were hardly 20 or 30 odd million people in 2007 on the internet. And when I actually started working in this sector, there were not more than 1 million people. They were using dial-ups. So just imagine that to connect to internet, you have a concept of dial-up. A lot of people
Right.
in this audience, if they are very young, they wouldn't even know what I'm talking. So I have been through that phase where you have dial-ups and you have a tape recorder connected to your very, very low end computer. And it is basically downloading software using a tape recorder to a
Right.
situation where, at IBIBO, there were, during the phase when I was building IBIBO, there were hardly 20, 25 million, regular users, right? Of course, all of that has very, very aggressively expanded. There are more than 400 million users now. But during this phase, two, three things have happened which have not been that great. And I'm giving a slightly realistic picture. Number one is, if you look at it, today's date, the Indian internet is largely owned by or rather is kind of colonized. So if you add WhatsApp plus Facebook plus a bit of Amazon plus a bit of entertainment properties, etc., and Google, of course, that's
Right.
95% of the traffic controlled by the American global businesses. Now, in one aspect, it's great because these are great services for normal customers. But on the other side, it is not that great for local entrepreneurial ecosystem, because the local entrepreneurial ecosystem is not typically creating value out of this audience, right? It is really a fence sitter. It's an onlooker. It's looking at, it's using tools. Like, for example, this tool that we are using right now, Zoom, this is not made in India, right? Which means that this value which is being created for all of us holding this conference call is not being captured in our country. And during this era, while we should have been innovating and while we should have been creating local products, local services, because that would have created immense value, immense GDP growth, immense per capita GDP growth, and immense job opportunities. I mean, the value has to be trapped by the country. That's how countries compete, right? I don't think we did a good job, honestly. The last decade has not been that great. And I'm being honest about it. I don't want to give a wrong picture. And I actually, if you look at it, this kind of mimics the growth of the country.
Right.
So that is, I think, one reality which one should have. And during this phase, this last decade and a half, actually what happened is these tech services companies, some of which have kind of bombed and some of which are obviously exist, created business around the concept of not innovation, but created business around the concept of cost arbitrage, which essentially meant that the creator population became cost arbitrage population. So someone who worked for TCS, with all due respect, or Infosys, that bunch of engineers could have been creating valuable, innovative applications in the country. On the other hand, they ended up becoming cost arbitrage suppliers, right? And I think from that point of view, it's not been great. But now the reality we need to digest, and now for the new entrepreneurs, that listen, WhatsApp of India is WhatsApp and it's not WeChat. Okay. Search of India is Google and not Baidu.
But what do you have to talk about Jio and Facebook combining in the latest?
I'll come to that. I'll come to that. That's a very different and a complex topic. I'll come to that. But first, let me just answer your question on how should the entrepreneurs think about it. And I wanted everyone to get this view because I've been through this very treacherous journey. It's not a very happy journey, by the way. Everything looks good from the outside. I mean, but the reality is that WhatsApp of India is WhatsApp and not WeChat. Google of India is Google and not Baidu. And I think in all probability, it seems for that Facebook of India is Facebook and not something like a WeContact in another nation. So the reality is that now the Indian entrepreneurs need to really build and think of solving local problems, reimagining the way things are done. And I think some of the services which are coming up do not mimic anything what is happening in the world and are creating original indigenous models in the tech space. Meesho is a very good example. There's another very interesting business being built by someone who's creating video commerce, for example. So many such businesses, which are building many such consumer applications on one hand, and also enterprise applications like Fresh Desk and Fresh Sales is all made in India and have become global applications. These are things which are now beginning to become paradigms of the entrepreneurs sitting on this Zoom conference call to actually emulate and say, what problems can I solve? And there are different problems to be solved for different categories of users. For example, IND Wealth is solving the problem, of course, for the tax-paying audience of the country, right? Whereas there could be problems to be solved in various spaces, whether it's health tech, education tech, fintech, etc., of various spectrums and subcategories of people. So the timing for the entrepreneurs is great. There is a bit of a COVID is driving a bit of a reset, control, refresh, which is fine. And this timing, I think a lot of entrepreneurs need to think of what problem can I solve for these 400, 500 million people. That's how they need to think, and not think, okay, fine, so there is this bike rental startup in some other place, can I launch it, without thinking through the problem. So timing is great, but I just wanted to give this monologue, boring background so that people know the evolution that this country has been through.
Right. Very helpful. So, Ashish, you mentioned about this latest venture of yours, IND Wealth, and whatever we read about it, it's a AI-enabled platform, and there's a lot of noise. We have also done few sessions here at IMA about, how AI is going to disrupt everything in the world. It's a overhyped term in many ways. We keep reading about it. Could you throw some light in terms of how you have actually implemented AI so everybody relates that AI is actually in action in businesses and it's no longer a concept to talk about?
Yeah. So first is that AI is not a chatbot. Okay. Everybody thinks AI means I'll go to an app or a website and I'll start chatting. It is not a chatbot.
Right.
Okay. Please understand. AI and machine learning basically breeds off very large set of data. It is able to process very large set of data and is able to learn from that data. That is really the crux of AI and machine learning, which is really being able to process real time, very large amount of data and learn from it and give intelligent recommendations to the users. So let me first take an example of something which IND did in a very powerful way and demonstrated the power of machine learning, which just happened yesterday. So as all of you out here may know, that there is a company called Franklin.
The Franklin one. Yeah. Right. I saw that.
And that company has basically gone and shut 6 of its funds, right? Which is basically, it has gone and essentially people who put money into those mutual funds. And by the way, they were non-equity mutual funds. So people who put their money is at risk. Remember, you put mutual funds for security, safety. Mutual funds sahi hai. You must be hearing these campaigns a lot. Now, what IND app does is it ingests lots of data from multiple sources. And the machine learning system basically creates signals which says that is there a high probability of companies defaulting?
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, what do these mutual funds hold? They hold companies. So in the case of Franklin India Fund, we started signaling automatically, because you can't do it manually, automatically to our members that, listen, please exit these funds because there is a very high risk of it defaulting. So we started communicating this 6 to 7 months ago to our customers. Please exit because there's a high risk of defaulting. These are the 5 reasons. Please exit. Automatic alerts coming into people's application. They had to press just one button because we have the full automated execution of the recommendation also. Lots of customers did take that action. I was one of them. So I like to eat my own dog food. So I was one of them, and I also exited. And we not only sent those alerts once, but multiple times, because there were multiple events which happened, right? From a Vodafone event to a Z event to a DHFL event, multiple events happened during the course of last 6-7 months. And then finally, yesterday, this debacle happened.
Right.
And it was beautifully back tested. Now, this is something which we could not have done without machine learning, creating a probability of default and hence reducing the risk of human beings and customers. So this could not have been done through normal data computation or linear Excel kind of a computation. And this is one very, very powerful example of how in finance we have used machine learning. There are many other manifestations. For example, I can share a more easier use case of machine learning, which is, let's say when you are on GoIbibo, you're trying to book a flight. What is the probability of the fare going up? Again, a very good example of machine learning. Similarly, today's date, you obviously, a lot of you consume Netflix. So the recommended
Right.
catalog that comes to you right on the top is again based on learning your behavior. And same thing with Amazon. So there are many, many use cases which in the past could not have been processed because it was done in a linear manner. And that's really,
Absolutely.
that's the really true use case. There's another very interesting use case of how Gmail today's date predicts what you need to write, what you want
The
to
text
it's learning.
prediction type.
So that's the true use of ML and AI. That's
Yeah, and it's amazing to hear that, you know, indigenous product companies like yourself are actually implementing it. So Google, Amazon, Netflix is great to hear, but we are proud to hear that even indigenous companies are actually putting AI in action.
There are lots and lots of companies doing it. For example, I'm sure the companies who do delivery of food and delivery of products use machine learning to create routing for its delivery boys. So there are hundreds of use cases.
Right.
And my sense is that this machine learning and AI is going to become the new normal. And this is really making things efficient for people. This is not about, oh my God, I'm going to take away jobs. It's making things efficient. And people need to, as time goes by, need to reskill. So the call center executive needs to upskill himself to solve slightly more interesting problems than to issue and reissue tickets, because that can be done automatically in general.
Correct.
So yeah, so I think that's really my sense on machine learning and AI. I think it's like business. It's going to be like business as usual. It's going to be like the default way of building businesses.
In fact, you know, many people are also talking about with the use of such technologies and with whatever is happening right now, a lot of work would also get offloaded into being done by AI and freeing up people, you know, who were doing these kind of analytics jobs or even high-end knowledge-based services. And some of the people are also asking me that, you know, how do you think post-corona the future of work is going to look like? I mean, I know some of us, or in fact, most of us are working from home remotely. Some companies are using, you know, remote control-based tools to track what their employees are doing. They're spying on them, and all that is we're hearing on the news. And I'm sure you are also using some of the tools and technology. So two things I want to know. One is how, you know, since it's an unprecedented situation, how some of the entrepreneurs we have here in the group can actually remotely manage it. They have never managed a team remotely before. So what are some of the learnings you can share with them to manage a team effectively in a remote manner? And then once this gets over, what is your view? Like, would people get into a 50-50 mode, that 50% of workforce would still remain in a remote environment and 50 would come to office, or will it come back to the normal again and it's just a temporary phase in your view?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think so. First and foremost is I think this has changed everything. This has changed everything. It has obviously no past precedence, and it has changed the way we will work. I will work, right? So if I had to travel to Mumbai to meet a bank, I will not do it now. And there's no reason for the bank to call me to Bombay to meet with him. Like the way you and I'm talking to everyone out here, we're almost like live, right? And it's so clear. Why do I need to be taking a flight and wasting my full day for a meeting? Or why should somebody be coming all the way from Bangalore to meet with me in person when we do have now technology? So I think firstly, everything is a lot of it is going to change, right? That's now writing on the wall. Now to your question that how do entrepreneurs manage in such situations? What do they do? So entrepreneurs who have teams, small teams, etc., I think what is really important is to set what we do internally is a concept called OKRs, objective key results. So what are my objectives for the next 90 days? And what should be the key metric results out of it, right? So what happens is a lot of teams, when they're building a company, they list down a laundry list of tasks without analyzing and without articulating what should be the outcome of it. What should it deliver? For example, I will do these, people say, I'll do these 70 things. But what people and teams need to talk about is if I need to do these top 5 things, which will help me to acquire these 10,000 customers. And hence, matricizing your objective key results is one of the most important things as a starting point because of working remotely as to what is it that which direction everybody is running and for what, and what is the milestone essentially.
Right.
And simplifying it. We have this horrible habit, including I also many times, is to create a laundry list of things where everything goes haywire, nothing gets prioritized, right? So you need to really go back and say, what are the, because you can't do 500 things, whatever, even if you're 5,000 people or 5 people, you can't do 5,000 things at the same time.
Right.
So you have to say, what are my top 5 things that I want to do in this quarter, in this week, in this month, basically. I think that's one. Second is using tools like I can share what we use. We use a tool called Slack, which works beautifully for us.
I'm going to write these things also, guys, in the chat so you can take notes.
So we use Slack. We use something called Jira for our projects. We definitely use all the processes for product management, which means writing PRDs, uploading them onto Jira. We use a lot of monitoring tools, various kinds, which helps us to really understand where we are in terms of our projects. We also measure every day. The other very important thing that everybody should do, even if somebody has not got a live business, should measure that what did my team and I do yesterday? What did we achieve yesterday? And it is stressful, but it is very, very effective.
And do you also do these kind of video, meetings every day, frequently, formal, informal?
Yeah. So as
engage.
So we do. So see, these things cannot be informal, unfortunately. These things have to be absolutely structured. You have to say that, okay, for example, for my particular business, I would have a review with the team, which only focuses on onboarding users. So there'll be a review which will only be onboarding and how do we improve that funnel? What are the actions that we should do so that conversion rates from download of our application to registration to people connecting their investment accounts and loan accounts, that increases, right? So there's just absolute deep work which happens there, and that review would happen every week. Similarly, there'll be a review with the investments team, there'll be a review with the loans team, there'll be a review with the tax team. So these are regular reviews which will happen. The engineering teams will do their daily stand-ups in their groups. So those have to be happening in a very disciplined and have to be happening in a formal way. You cannot have informal ways, non-calendared ways. That'll be chaos essentially.
Okay. So I'm just going to take a couple of questions in the interest of time because we'll close in 5-7 minutes. So one question people are asking me, and you are an expert at raising capital, we all know, that how should entrepreneurs, now approach investors with this whole COVID happening? Do you think you can do these virtual kind of pitches to investors? Will investors be more wary in terms of putting in capital? What is your view on, entrepreneurs seeking Series A, Series B kind of investment at this stage?
So my sense is that the best teams who have the ability and start showing a demonstrate to execute well will get capital.
No.
And the reason I say this is that if I see the amount of capital which has been raised, and I'll talk about the food chain, but the amount of capital which has been raised to invest in India is a lot. It's undeployed, lots of undeployed capital for private investments. So I would say that an A plus team will get investments and will be able to raise capital by exactly doing video pitches like the way we are talking right now, without a need to meet in person. So I think that will happen. The challenge would be for the A minuses and Bs, which usually in very buoyant times do get capital. So the challenge will be for a B team and an A minus team to raise capital.
Okay, understood. The last question we're going to take up is, how do you see, small companies? When I say small, typically MSMEs, not the internet growth story startups. How can they use some of these technologies like AI and ML, which you mentioned? People have this hesitation and apprehension that it all requires a lot of capital. So if I'm not able to raise capital, my dreams of using these advanced technologies would die down. Is that the case, or do you think there's a case in point to use some of these things in a limited manner as well in your MSME environment?
Yeah, so I think in the MSME environment, either people have invested in their own technology capability or they've not. So the companies which have not invested in their own technology capability will obviously find it hard to build that in-house competence. Having said that, there are many companies who are building cloud solutions, which some of these SMEs should try and leverage.
Understood. And we've got one last question. I don't know how you would want to take it up. Somebody's talking about the tier 2 and tier 3 towns, that, what are some of the things or entrepreneurial ideas they can do to drive digital penetration, payment space in tier 2 and tier 3 towns with the current environment? Do you see like this migrant workers are going back to their towns? Do you see that changing the landscape of digital penetration in these towns?
Yeah, I think there are hundreds of ideas, right? And I would want to use this time better, but all I can say is this, that whenever such situations arise, there is obviously opportunity. So for example, one of the biggest problem is that the migrant workers have gone back or are all over the place. And then there are factories, industries, construction sites which need such supply. So simply connecting the two using technology is going to be very powerful, as just one of the examples. Okay. I think there is also a lot of interesting stuff to do with government plus technology and small towns in India and rural areas. So I just feel that the opportunities are immense. This is just one of the ideas that I shared because you talked about migrant workers going back, but it's just absolutely immense opportunities at this time.
So, folks, we are out of time. I know you still have a lot of questions. So if you allow, Ashish, I might send some of these questions to you. And whenever you get time, you're more than happy to respond to these questions at your will. And we are really privileged and happy and honored to have you. And thanks so much for sharing the words of wisdom. I'm getting a lot of responses in my private messages that the kind of topics you have covered and touched upon are so real and relevant that they're all going back more knowledgeable. So really appreciate it.
Wish everyone all the best. Stay safe. Thank you very much for inviting me for this session. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Take care.
So now we have the second part of the session. So we've talked about entrepreneurship, corporates. Now the second part of the topic today we have in our session is somebody who's going to give us a completely different view of of innovation and digital leadership from the academia and research point of view. Rajni, do we have Professor Rao joined with us already?
Yes, he's co-host as well, I believe.
Professor Rao, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, I'm able to hear. So it says waiting room, something. Yeah, I'm here.
Are we able to see you? Yes, we are able to see you. Thank you so much, Professor Rao, for taking out time. We really appreciate you joining us. for everybody, as a warm welcome to Professor Rao. He's the director of IIT Delhi. His list of achievements and his bio is extremely long and lengthy, but I am going to share some nuggets with you so uh, the honor we have of having him in our session today and the intellect which he brings with him. Professor Rao, before joining IIT Delhi a few years back, served as PK Kelkar Chair Professor for Nanotechnology in the Department of Electrical Engineering at IIT Bombay. Dr. Rao has over 450 research publications in nanoscale devices and nanoelectronics. And he is also an inventor, and he's got almost 43 patents. I mean, it's a big achievement to have only one or two patents we talk about. He's got over 43 patents, and some of them are also commercialized. So it's not only theoretical research, it's being commercialized, used. He also is the co-founder of two deep learning technology startups. So in the last session, we were talking about AI and ML from a business point of view, but people like Professor Rao are actually driving the innovation in AI and ML as well. And he's also the recipient of the prestigious Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize in Engineering Sciences in 2005 and the Infosys Prize in 2013. He has also received Swarna Jayanti Fellowship Award from the Department of Science and Technology. He has served as the chairman of IEEE APED Bombay, and he is also served as vice chairman of IEEE Asia Pacific region. So, guys, we are in safe hands. We've got TVs of knowledge with us right now. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. The first question I want to ask you, and just for your reference, sir, in the previous session, we were talking about how entrepreneurs are driving digital innovation, how startups are driving the ecosystem in India. Since I also, as an alumni from IIT, I remember when I was studying, we always used to crib about that, whatever we see in the industries when we join for internships or companies, and what we learn at university, I mean, there's just apples and oranges. So all people used to complain. But now, from what I hear and read, things are changing on the ground, and leaders like yourself at the helm of affairs are driving these changes. So how do you envisage that we can foster better collaboration between private organizations, corporate startups, and research institutions, such as IIT, to drive joint R&D initiatives and product development ideas together?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. I'm honored to be on this session. In fact, academic institutions, if you look at for a very long time, we look at our reason for existence as for two things. One is the dissemination of knowledge in terms of training programs, teaching programs, degree programs, and all of that. Or we also, for example, have looked at the knowledge generation. So the second aspect was generating new knowledge. So these two were always there as our mandate. So teaching and then the research. But things were fine. But I think at some point in time, what became important for us was the innovation as a third vertical for the academic institution. And that is when things started to look a little bit different for us, because the teaching was happening, the research was happening, but innovation was something where you would take that research to the society and you would create wealth out of that knowledge. And that is when we started to put in place a variety of measures and see how we can bring in relevance to our research. The research is happening, but if that research is not relevant to the society or to the world that you are in, if you're doing something which nobody really sees as a problem, then you will never be able to take that to the society. And I think the relevance part was missing for a very long time in our academic institutions. And the second thing which was also missing was the delivery mechanisms. You do research, you discover something new, which it might have applications in the society, but how would you, really make it available to the people? And until now, the only way we could do that was by interacting with the industry. So you tie up with an industry, you transfer your technologies to them. I think that was one mechanism that was there for a very long time for us to take our research to society and make that innovation sort of a thing happen. But that wasn't really working very well. Academia industry interactions in this country, have not really taken off, despite what we have been saying for 50 years. For whatever reason it is, that's a separate topic by itself. It hasn't really taken off. But one thing that has definitely happened in the last 5 years or 7 years is the startup ecosystem has evolved as a way for us to take our research to the society. So now I don't have to wait for an industry to come and work with me. I can start a company of my own and then take my research to the society. Once this became available for the researchers and for academic institutions like IITs and IIT Delhi, then there was no limit. Then we could do lot many things which were earlier not possible, which were earlier waiting for somebody from the industry to come and talk to us. Now I don't have to wait for it. If I think I have a technology, a solution to a problem, I can start a company and I can take things to the market. Therefore, I think this knowledge dissemination, knowledge generation, and innovation going hand in hand in the academic institutions now, thanks primarily to the startup ecosystem that has evolved in the country. I think now you will start seeing a lot more happening, in our academic institutions. Until now, for example, just yesterday's example, IIT Delhi, now has a detection kit for COVID.
Right.
Now, how do we take that to the market? I mean, years ago, I would have, unless an industry came forward, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But today, the faculty members are now starting a company, and now they will be able to sell the whole thing, from IIT Delhi itself. I think, this is what has made our academic institutions more visible, more impactful, and you start seeing now more and more of this happening because this has now evolved as a mechanism, as a new mechanism for academic institutions, at least in IITs. It hasn't unfortunately percolated down to the university system and other institutions in the country because there are still a lot of regulations, a lot of rules for them to start their own companies. But at a place like IIT Delhi, 1 in 5 faculty members would have their own startup. And these are also people who are very active in research. So therefore, once you bring that Saraswati and Lakshmi together, I don't think there is any limit anymore. Until now, the biggest mistake we have done for whatever reason, cultural, hangover and all that was, we always kept them as separate. You never would hear in the country, a rich professor. A rich professor is an oxymoron, in our kind of a thinking. But now that you are bringing research and the startups, all of that together, now you will start seeing people taking their technologies to the market, using this startup as a new mechanism. This is a recent phenomenon. I mean, 10 years ago, you wouldn't find many professors having their own companies. But now, like I said, every 1 in 5 professors at IIT Delhi either have a company or will soon have a company.
Wow, that's a big, bold statement and a number to learn, guys. That 1 in every 5 professor is going to be involved in a startup or a company. Sir, you just sort of underplayed the proud news which came in yesterday about IIT Delhi innovating on the COVID testing kit, which is going to be for rupees 300 if I'm not wrong. And I have been reading in the last few weeks in news, and I'm sure all of us have, of some of the amazing things IIT Delhi specifically has been doing around COVID and collaborating with the ICMR and the government agencies to come up with better COVID testing kits, ventilators, AI ML enabled testing, do it yourself kind of testing kits. So for everybody's benefit, we would just love to know some of these key R&D achievements around specifically COVID, because that's a hot topic, which IIT Delhi specifically under your leadership is trying to commercialize and is trying to bring it out in the market.
About a month ago, when the lockdown was announced, and the easiest thing for all of us to do was tell everybody to go home or stay at home. That's what every institution did. But at IIT Delhi, we did things a little bit differently. That time, actually, I did send that email to all the IIT, people that lockdown is announced. Now we need to close down the institute and all that. But my next mail was, anyone who is working in any area related to COVID, they can stay back. IIT would take care of all their requirements. Their laboratories will be kept open. Their students can continue to function. We will run the hostels for them, and institute would also give them funding. So we said they can receive funding from the institute for whatever are their requirements. So once we said that, we said, now let us know who are the people who can do that. there were many faculty members, for example, in our Kusuma School of Biosciences, that COVID detection thing, they were working on virus related, issues for a very long time. For 20 years, there was a group working on viruses. But the moment they saw that COVID-19 is an important issue right now, they said they reoriented their research to work on the COVID-19. And then they wrote back to me saying that, if you are provided this, then we will be able to work on this COVID detection. We said, fine. Immediately we gave them all the resources that they required. They worked for 3 months, actually, day and night on the COVID related thing. So from whatever virus work they were doing for 20 years, but 3 months of intensive work on the COVID-19. Now they were able to come up with a detection kit, and now that has got approved by ICMR. And now we are actually, at least today, I have received at least inquiries from 10 companies, saying we would like to take it up and manufacture them. We are talking to them, and but our primary goal in all of this will be to make it affordable for people. I think for the country to solve the COVID problem, testing is going to be a very critical ingredient. Without proper testing, we will never be able to reopen. Even if you look at IIT Delhi example, at some point we have to bring back all the 10,000 students back to the campus. And if we don't know, even if one person there is positive, and that virus can again come back and spread all over. I think when those people come back, they all need to be tested. Even if you don't want to do 10,000 tests on them, you can use some nice mathematical kind of algorithms, and you can group them into different sort of segments, and then you can randomly test them, come up with nice algorithms to predict the behavior of those groups. All of that also we are working right now. So I think, even right now, you are using testing as a way to identify people and quarantine them. I think very soon we will require testing just to ensure that it doesn't spread again. And that is when we start to reopen our institutions, our industries, our factories. I think that is when the testing will become much more important. And there, these low cost and quick kind of tests are going to be a major boon. And that is where we want to pitch IIT Delhi technology as. I think we want it to be low cost. We want it to be almost 1 million kits. Let us say, if we are able to manufacture, and with that, if we are able to test a large number of people, I think that will help the nation in a very significant way. So that's how we are looking at. And also, another thing, we have a very nice department of textile engineering, and there again there are many faculty members working on the PPEs, and they are working on masks and the antiviral coatings for the dresses. There are people working on the ventilators. They have tested their first version of the ventilator. There are people working on drug discovery. We opened up our high performance computation facility, a 2 petaflop facility. We said anybody who wants to do molecular level modeling related to COVID from the drug discovery point of view, or virus detection vaccine point of view, we said the facility is available free of charge. We received a large number of proposals. Just a few days ago, we approved a dozen projects around our high performance computational facility. So I think this was done to a plan, and I am happy that it is working out very well right now. And almost every week now you see something getting into the society from IIT Delhi, because the last 3 months of efforts in that direction, that intensive sort of an activity around COVID in our laboratories. I think now slowly we will have many of these come into market, and I think timing is also the key. I told our faculty members, if you miss this opportunity, when would you make an impact? I mean, today developing a COVID detection kit 1 year from now will not have any impact. But if you can do it now, I think it can be a game changer. I think people got that message, and there are people who are so motivated right now. I'm worried about their health sometimes, because they think that if we miss this bus, what do? We would have lost an opportunity kind of thing. People are working day and night, and I'm very happy to see that kind of passion, enthusiasm to make a difference. I think we will have a major impact eventually in addressing the COVID problem in the country. And I would like to see IIT Delhi be at that place where when we look back after a year or two, we should be able to list out a few technologies and say that this is how we have helped the country in stopping this particular epidemic.
No, absolutely. And we're very proud to hear that, sir. In fact, some of the people are asking me as we speak that, you mentioned about the computational facility specifically being available for whoever wants to, build something on top of it. Many people are asking me that, is there a structured mechanism you have put in place where, a lot of startups are there on this platform, on this session today, a lot of independent researchers, marketing gurus, consultants, they're all here in this session. They're asking that, is there a way, a structured mechanism in which they can get associated, not only for COVID-based research and development activities, but in general with IIT where they can lean on, knowledge resources or labs and they can contribute their technological know-how? Is there a structured framework in place for that?
There is, in fact, IIT Delhi incubator has always been an open incubator. So we said that anyone in the country who has an idea can just come and write to us and become part of our incubator. Of course, there is a screening process. We don't want to let everybody in and give them space. Therefore, the technical wise, there will be a screening. But if they qualify that, they can come and become part of IIT Delhi family. They don't need to be alumni. They don't need to be faculty members. They don't need to have any connection to IIT Delhi. Everybody, IIT Delhi incubator is an open incubator. Everyone is welcome to come and set up their startups here. I think that is a open invitation, and that is how we have been functioning until now. And many times people do write to me. They say that I need this technical expertise, and I do connect them to the faculty members who have the technical expertise. But then it becomes a kind of an interaction between the faculty member and that startup where they can come up with a kind of a arrangement for working with each other. So that sort of a thing happens in a very significant way. There are many faculty members who are mentors for many startups, and even if they are not admitted in IIT Delhi, so they can have the mentorship from IIT Delhi. Any facility, research facility available at IIT Delhi, they are always available for startup. Any startup, let anyone say that I need this facility at IIT Delhi, for my research, for my startup. I want to have an access to that. We will treat them exactly like how we treat our faculty members. IIT Delhi would have at least 300 crores of worth scientific research equipment. All of those facilities are available for the startup, and we have made it as a policy. In fact, in the last 4 years alone, even within the institute, there were problems for people to access each other's facilities. But we made a central research facility, CRF as we call it, and it used to have about 4 or 5 equipment earlier. Now we have close to 100 equipment in the central research facilities. Any equipment from 10 crores to 20 crores to, we are buying actually a cryo EM worth about 35 crores for the central facility. All of these facilities are available. So all of them are available not only for everybody within the IIT community, but also to the people outside. And particularly if you are a startup, you will be treated on par with the IIT faculty member. So if the charges and everything will be very nominal. And I think that offer is there. So they just need to go to the IIT Delhi website, look what facilities are available, what they can use. And after that, they are most welcome to come and use it. Anytime they face any issue, they should write to me. And because I think our policies, say that they must be facilitated in all possible ways. And if something is not going right, I should be the first one who needs to know that. So I think that is a open invitation for all startups that IIT Delhi is an open incubator. All our facilities are available for anyone who needs them.
Wow, that's a big statement, sir. In fact, I think many of people who are asking questions here, you don't need to be associated with IIT in any way, and you are still welcome here. That's a big, welcome statement from you, sir. In fact, a lot of people, are asking me, and even in the earlier session, we were talking about how artificial intelligence and machine learning is now going to disrupt all the products, processes, and organizations in a big way. And whether we talk about engineers who are already studying in IIT, who are gonna land up in jobs in few years from now, or even people like myself or some of the other people in this session who are working in an organization, they all fear that AI is going to fundamentally change their nature of role and job function in few years from now, and they don't know how to sort of upskill or reskill them. Some of them, and I keep doing a lot of sessions around AI, and people ask me, if I don't know Python, is there any future for me in learning AI or not? I don't know mathematics or statistics. So a lot of these apprehensions are there in the minds of people. So what do you have to say to them that, how they can future proof themselves when AI and ML wave is gonna impact their role and job? And is IIT Delhi doing, if we don't know, any programs or some certificates in AI in which they can come and reskill themselves? And what kind of curriculum changes are you planning to incorporate AI in general for engineers who are studying at IIT Delhi?
Well, that's a good point. In fact, very soon you will hear an announcement from IIT Delhi. We are starting a new school for AI. We call it SKY, SCAI, and we are looking for a major endowment from one of our alumni, and we are now looking at a 30 million US dollar kind of a school at IIT Delhi, focusing on the AI. In fact, this year we plan to start our first MTech program in the AI ML area, but unfortunately,
Okay.
because of COVID, we we need to postpone it to next year. But there is going to be a master's program for AI ML at IIT Delhi. There are minor degree programs, but they are only available for people who are already registered students at IIT. But MTech program will be an open program and people can join. And also very soon you will also hear from IIT Delhi the certificate courses online certificate courses. If you look at
Okay.
the IIT's model, not only IIT Delhi, any IIT model, we have a huge entry barrier to enter
Hmm.
IIT. You have to clear all those most difficult exams and enter IIT, but we don't really have an exit barrier. Once you get in, you get out. It's a matter
Hmm.
of, if it is 4 years, it may take 5 years for some, but
Hmm.
you get out. So that was a model we were operating. So you take a very few students and then you give them the high quality kind of an education. What at IIT Delhi we are turning it around a little bit. We are saying, if I can start a open certificate program online where let us say 10,000 people can take it, and we will not even look at what their background is, whether they have the required skills and all of that. They're all, they can enter into the program, a certificate
Hmm.
program. Much of the teaching will be done online. Most of it will be done online. We are actually negotiating with the companies in the education space. In fact, we have already discussed with all the large players who are in the learning in the education space now, and so we will be tying up with them for certification and all of that. The teaching will be done by IIT Delhi faculty. The examinations will be conducted by IIT Delhi faculty. But these companies will be our channel partners. They will do all the facilitation for scaling it up and all of that. And anyone who passes the exams will get a certificate from IIT Delhi. So that certificate will be given after due kind of evaluation. So that way you let many people enter, but you let only a few people to get out by taking those examinations and qualifying the criteria that IIT Delhi will set. And that is something that we are going to start very soon. We couldn't have done it on our own, when you are talking of those sort of numbers. But I think by joining hands with these large companies in the education space, I think we believe we
Hmm.
can do that. And already the discussions are done. Already the internal approvals are there. Within a few months' time, you will actually see online certificate programs from IIT Delhi, and one of them will definitely be in the AI ML kind of areas, and that will happen, and many people will be able to make use of the kind of expertise that is available here, and that way we would also have helped the country in many ways, because AI is going to get into almost every sector, and unless we scale up our programs, I think that quality kind of instruction will be a difficult thing for many people in the country. So
Right.
IIT Delhi will be fulfilling that role into a large extent.
So we look forward to that, sir.
But
So
just
some
as
of the
you said,
people are.
I would also like to give the viewers a kind of a perspective. AI
Mhm.
is something which has come now, right? But just
Mhm.
look back. If I look back my career, let's say if I started my programs in 90s, 80s, 90s, kind of a thing. It all started with IT, the information
Mhm.
technology, right? That was
Mhm.
when the whole thing started happening. Then came the biotechnology, right? So then after the biotechnology came the nanotechnology. Everybody said nanotechnology, now everything will be nano. After
Mhm.
that came the cognitive technologies. When I say cognitive technologies, all the AI, ML, I would put it into the cognitive technologies. Now the future is going to be quantum technologies, the QT. So
Mhm.
if you look
Right.
at this progression of how the technology is evolving, IT, BT, IT, BT, NT, right, CT, and then the QT. These are the 5 Ts. I think in our lifetime, 50 years, I have seen at least 5 T's now, right? That is what will happen to almost everybody, who is entering the job markets today. So every 10 years, you will have to reinvent yourself, and every 10 years, something new will come, which will look like a disruptor. So therefore, that continuous learning is going to be a very, very important and a fundamental kind of a requirement. So to our students also, if I modify the curriculum so much that they fit into a job profile today, they will be out of job day after tomorrow, because everything is changing so fast. So you cannot make them suitable for one particular job right now. So you need to make them, you need to give them the ability to learn. So when they have that ability to learn, that is when they will be able to change with the times and learn new technologies, pick up new skills, and remain current throughout their career. So otherwise, like what I have seen, those 5 T's in my life, for somebody who is starting now, you will also see so many different sorts of things changing every 10 years. So I think that continuous learning is going to be very, very important for anyone who is going to enter the education space, right?
Very well said. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to take one question, and in fact, going to combine a couple of questions. So the question, sir, is that we see a lot of innovation happening in rural India. Like I'm sure all of us come across and see those videos on social media where somebody has done some jugaad innovation in a small town in India, not having had any formal education, and they don't have access to institutions such as IIT as well, be it logistically or be it because of their demographics. And there's an interesting idea. Mr. Ram Manohar Namile has said that why can't we have something like a spot and tap the talent campaign? We have all these music, dance shows happening, on the TV all the time. But why not somebody like IIT Delhi, for the sake of example, take up a leadership and say we're going to trap these rural innovations and we're going to bring them on board, make them mature, and help them, provide them a platform to come out on a global stage. Do you see merit in something like this, sir?
There's a huge merit in that. That is exactly how MHRD thought about a year ago, and you will all of this you will find on a website called Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, UBA. So Unnat Bharat Abhiyan is a program which is run by MHRD. IIT Delhi happens to be the national coordinator. Under the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, this is exactly what is happening. What we are doing is each institute is adopting a few villages nearby, and then we study those villages, and then let's say if a particular village requires a solution, we develop that solution and implement it. If that solution works in that village, using the UBA network, we want to spread it across the country. And in the UBA, because Government of India is involved, the entire district and village administration is involved. All sarpanches are part of it, all the district collectors are part of it. That way, once a technology solution is available, now it can be spread out in the country. The UBA is the program that one should look at, Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. But at IIT Delhi, in fact, I have realized the importance of exposing our students to rural problems. We started what we call a rural internship program. At IIT Delhi, we are running a village internship program where every year, many of our BTech students go to villages and stay there in the summer. And then let's say you want to know the agriculture problem. The best way to learn it is go and work, stay with a farmer for a couple of months and just understand how agriculture is done, what the farmer goes through, and how what kind of fertilizers, what kind of the pesticides, and how the farmer makes those decisions. All of that is a learning for a student in these institutions. So we started a village internship program under the UBA. UBA is essentially an answer to that question. They should look at that UBA website, Unnat Bharat Abhiyan website. If there are any questions, I can connect them to the national coordinator, and they can always work with them to take it forward.
Sure. No, that's very helpful. I've written in the chat also for everybody's reference. So we are short of time, unfortunately. Professor Rao, if there are any other questions, I would keep sharing it with you offline, and at your will, whoever you want to answer, feel free to reply back, and we'll share it with the people who have asked the questions. With this, we're going to conclude the session. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable time and your knowledge with us. We are truly grateful to you. And thanks everyone for joining in. Thanks Rajni and Sanjay. And we thank BML Munjal University, who has also been our kind knowledge partner for this session. Thank you everyone. Stay safe at home, and we look forward to the next session. Thank you so much, sir.